stopped. I'm going to start again. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go on to task 2 before we have a break for lunch. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to write a good practice guide on initiating, planning and managing project risk. So yeah, this is sort of quite a little bit basic, I suppose. It's just looking at things in a slightly different way to potentially what you would do in other sort of more disciplined project management sort of, yeah, the things you've looked at. So so we're going to look at initially, how do we start the project? So what happens for the initiation? Then, as I mentioned, 2.4, doesn't that look familiar? Techniques for working collaborative with stakeholders. So I think we could quite happily lift what you've looked at in the other assignment, but what I'm going to say is we need to keep focusing on your particular project for this. So actually, although you may find certain things useful, if you're looking at if it's a different context, then you might use the same techniques that you've talked about, but actually apply it a little bit differently. So it's not necessarily going to be that you just cut and paste it. You're going to have to look at sort of rewording it. So we'll look at those bits first, and then we're going to look at data and information afterwards, and then project risk after as well. So 2.1, we are looking at the process for initiating projects. So tell me, when you're kicking off a project, what happens? What's your experience?
Generally panic.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you given a good lead up time or anything?
It depends on the contract and the award time. You will generally have what's called a period of stand down, which is you've been awarded it, you can't tell anyone until that's been formally announced by the client. And then you are running headlong into the project, and it's just delivery.
So
I mean, there's a bit of involvement, like even before that. So it's depending on the size of the project. You have to get permission. Are we looking at that sort of stage? Is that what you're talking about, like the development? The DCO, the kind of awarding.
We're looking at everything that happens before it kicks off.
Yeah, so there'll be an extensive stage of public consultation and buy-in from the government at a Secretary of State level to justify the project's existence, which is what I was involved on the M4. So, you know, there was an awful lot feeding into the DCO, which is the inspectorate awarding of the job, which we had to do a load of work for at the beginning. You know, an assessment into cost feasibility, the environmental impact, all fed into, the kind of effective planning permission at a government level. And then
DCO stand for?
Development consent order. So it is government, it's planning permission at a government level. And then you're, like you say, the stage that Claire talks about, all of a sudden, before you know it, it's like go, the shots fired. And
if you're going to be involved in the project, does anyone give you a little tap on the shoulder so you know in advance? Or if it's because you mentioned about it being quite sort of almost a bit of a secret squirrel thing till it's all official?
It's a bit of a strange one, because I think obviously Stephen's taking it from design into construction, and where I'm talking about it's from kind of the optioneering into design. So you will have, there'll be rumblings around a bit that you're kind of going for a bid and what that bid is, and you'll be approached if your CV is being put forward, but that doesn't mean anything. You can put your CV into a bid and then never work on the project. So you'll be aware if your name is kind of being put forward, and then the next step will be obviously you'll find out whether you've been awarded the work, which is all very secret squirrel, kind of like quiet, and then get an award date when you can actually start working on the contract. But in that kind of downtime, it will be organising the processes, the systems, the people that you're kind of going to be utilising for the project. And then you'll go into your kind of kick-off meetings, which will tell you fully about the project, who's going to be working on it, what practices we're going to be utilising, the standards, etc. But that is a very short kind of mobilisation time before you kind of get into delivering the project.
So
yeah, you're kind of hearing different, like, so Claire's, yes, I'm speaking from a delivery side, so appreciate that I won't be involved in Claire's stage really at all.
We'll
you know,
we'll
yeah,
go
yeah.
inside it. There you go.
They're almost projects themselves, aren't they? You know, they're like packages of work to get the project to your stage, and then like say you hand it over. But there is a point, like you can, like, I don't know what, because it's publicly available information on the HE's website, which is in, you know, it does state the stage of each job. I don't know at what point it can be made publicly available, and you can start to talk about it and resource it. But yeah, I think the stage that a delivery partner would get involved is normally in the public domain, and we can talk about it, because when I got involved with the M4 pre-planning permission, I think it was still in the public domain. It just hadn't reached. It's a bit like, you know, the Heathrow. I mean, that's not been given its the go-ahead yet, but we all know about it, and you know, there's all the talk about it and stuff.
So given that the RIS 2 got planned in RIS 1, and that got approved by government, which is our instruction for working, Dart Charge Service is actually slightly different. It's a protocol that sits out of the SOFA, which I can't remember what that stands for, but it's essentially still an instruction from government to start the project. But then it sits within my directorate, the Strategy and Planning Directorate, and it just kind of gets formulated, which is Claire's area, but from the client side, not the bidding side. And then once it gets into the development phase, it gets passed off to major projects and such like that. So those are the big projects anyway.
Where it gets confusing
is a project within a project, but you've got the strategic outline business case, the outline business case, the full business case. You have various gateways to go through before it even gets kicked off as such. So it depends where your kickoff point is, really. Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting, as we seem to have the entire process on this call.
Yeah.
So from that kind of strategic, we are going to go fix something, there's then the design element and then the construction element, which is the full.
So for LTC, we've been involved with them, like they're a separate project, but they've been working for 2-3 years to get the DCO in. So that's their aspect currently. And then Stephen will come in later.
But even as a developer, you get packages of work that get awarded by the client to help inform at various stages.
Yeah, that's true.
It depends. Yeah, it's all up. I guess it's client driven, isn't it? Really, like what they want to do and how much money they want to spend.
Yeah. Also, I mean, we had a project initiation document, and then one of the gateway people decided that they didn't want a project initiation document. They wanted a project management plan. So we had to change our project initiation document into a project management plan halfway through the project, kind of thing. So, and it just gets updated at each stage. So you enter a new stage, you kick off, we have summit meetings and stuff, but it's still the same project.
So just thinking about this from the assignment point of view, because we've talked about this, there's a lot of sort of almost pre-work before the project is at a point where it can go ahead. I'm just conscious, looking at the word count, that we've got, so analyse the process for initiating the project, approximately 325 words. And I think, like, from what you've described, Stephen, you could be at sort of 700 words, and we haven't even got to the first meeting, have we? Because of all the stages that happen before the. So I think we need, maybe on this, sort of almost have to give a scope of it, as in once that has happened. So would that be, because otherwise you're going to struggle with this, just because there's too much to say, isn't there?
Possibly, for the purpose of clarity, we'll be talking about contracts awarded onwards.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the way to do it, because Otherwise, yeah, we're not even sort of, we're meant to be talking about things like, and this sort of the KPIs that have been set, the project initiation documents like Claire was talking about, or, you know, the defining the purpose. So it's sort of all those, the sort of initial scoping once you're involved in the project. So yeah, if we, yeah, let's go to the, when I've taught, so I've taught this, the same project, the same course you're on, we do it internally at for members of staff at Coventry University. No one is involved in a project at Coventry University that we teach. Everyone is business as usual. And it's just so interesting, isn't it, how different organisations, because you're all primarily involved in projects, aren't you? That's seems to be a, you know, a key part of the way that things are delivered. It just seems to be very culturally, organisations are very, very different. So I added this in because none of them understood what initiation was, you know, what's going to happen. Whereas you don't need this, because this was just an example of an organisation I was working with when they were getting some software to be launched, and they had actually designed an initiation process with their clients that they could work with to start it happening. But I think this is irrelevant to you, because it's, you know, you've already talked about the things that you need to do, the different stages, which I've got a slide talking about some of these things as well. You know, these 3 roles for the initiation, or sort of for the project, are these 3 roles that resonate with you, or are they not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Massively, yeah.
So give me an example of who would a project sponsor then? What sort of level are they? They're quite senior.
Yeah, usually.
HE for me.
They're what, sorry?
Well, mine would be an HE rep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the projects I'm accountable for. My team's accountable for. I'm called the project sponsor. It's like an HE Highways Agency throwback sort of title. So you're basically responsible for the finances of that, delivering finances of that project. It's more like a financial thing they actually use the sponsor title for. So you know, you do your month-end finances to make sure you're on track to spend the budget, you know, not go over budget, etc.
Are you, if you were, for the projects that you're a sponsor for, do you tend to be a sponsor for the duration, or do you ever get moved off and someone else?
Well, yeah, I'm just a sponsor for the delivery phase. In fact,
okay.
In the initiation of the project, the development of the project, the sponsor will be different, and then we write to our business partner to change the sponsor upon the start of delivery. So it's a bit weird. You get an email gets sent and by our financial team and says, can we change the project sponsor from, and it'll be the head of development, to me, if you see what I mean. That's just obviously some sort of process type thing.
Yeah, so there seems to be the financial implications there then for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about project sponsor with Highways England is all about the financial governance of a scheme, because that's all they're really interested in. Is it going over, under budget, etc.
So it's
delivered in year, it doesn't really the time scale. It probably doesn't. They're not really interested in that. The senior management, all they're interested in is it where's it at budget wise, and are we delivering the outputs we said we were going to deliver?
Where does it? Sorry,
I would disagree with that. The sponsors I've had are very interested in are we delivering on time? You know, they have some idea of the finances, obviously, because they're putting quite a lot in overheads in the work I do internally. So my project sponsor will be quite senior within the business, and I have to report up to them return on investment, program, and deliverables. And if I go and tell him that I'm over program, he starts seeing that there's going to be more costs, and his return on investment is getting smaller because it's going on for a longer duration.
Right. Yeah.
Our project sponsor in the kind of work I do is he's my go-to if I'm stuck, if I've got blockers, if I need that help to kind of get over hurdles, or because I'm quite junior in the work that I do, I have to deal with quite a lot of people who are senior to me that won't listen to me. So he has to come in and be that kind of conduit to get people on board. So his first question is always around program as opposed to budget, on that, because I think program impacts budget. So I would say he's always on me about my programs.
Okay, so different impetus, aren't they, depending on what side you're on, I suppose. This project board, is this something that's united across what you're doing? Do you always have a project board, a steering group?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't have a project board, Hannah.
Paul, you're just one on your own today, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I take it our delivery team is the project board, because I think we do everything it says on there, but we're certainly not called the project board in any shape or form. We're just the delivery team.
Yeah, it is quite different then, isn't it? So those of you that you were saying, and you were saying that, well, tell me about the project board and what they do. How often do they come together? What do they, who's part of it? How many people are in it? How does it work?
Ours it changes according to the needs of the project, really, and the stage of the project.
Okay.
So actually our project sponsor, just to mix things up, is DFT, road sponsor. And then our senior responsible owner chairs the project board, and he's our executive director. But it's kind of made up of, as Claire said, the key higher people. But we've got our terms of reference, so it's the highest level of within the project, the highest level of authority. So they deal with our strategic milestones, but then we have lower governance forums to deal with tactical milestones and such. But it meets every 5 to 6 weeks, and is just a standard meeting, really. Causes a lot of stress. I'm actually redeveloping the proposed agendas and terms of reference for our next stage right now, so sometimes.
How many people are involved at the meeting then, in the terms of when they're getting together?
Currently about 10, I'd say. It does change depending on who, because we've got the project board members and then the project team so I go, I occasionally speak, I take minutes, but I'm not able to make the decisions, if that makes sense. I'm not that part of the quorum. But I think at the next stage, when we've got the suppliers on board, it's going to broaden out to about 15 people, maybe a bit more, just because we need to have everyone involved, and they'll be the senior suppliers. Okay. So it broadened out. Yeah.
And then, so that in terms of the project sponsor, in your experience, how much time do they dedicate? Is it sort of one of the things that they're doing? Is it, or are they full time on it? Are they quite senior? What's what's your experience of what they?
The project sponsor, so our DFT person, I presume, is quite senior. But although, to be honest, the actual project sponsor delegated it to his subordinate, who just has a bit more time for that sort of thing.
Okay.
Generally, if things are going well, they'll attend project board. That's about it. They want a bit more involvement, so we do talk to them outside of that, but it's our program manager and senior project manager who talk to him, rather than at my level, which is project manager level. And that's just like phone calls. It's definitely not his full-time day job. Same with our SRO, as and when, and the project board, if we're coming up to approvals, he'll be more involved, but otherwise he trusts quite a lot. So everyone's a bit more involved now because we've just been through the approvals and we're going into the next stage. But really, it's helpful. but it can be an annoyance as well.
So you mentioned you're one of the project managers. How many are
there? Ideally, there would be 3 project managers, 1 senior project manager, 1 program manager, and an assistant project manager, and a project management office support. Currently, there are 2 project managers, a senior project manager, program manager, and an assistant project manager, some of whom are part-time. But we're part of a multidisciplinary team, so we've got some of the BAU team full-time working on the project, and they are work stream leads, but they're not actually project managers. So they have very little project management experience, but they know the service and they're going to be taking the service forward when it becomes BAU. So we've been involving them from that point of view. So it's a big unwieldy beast, and we've got an IT program manager coming in. We've got people who work on it full time on commercial assets from the commercial and procurement directorate. It's very multidisciplinary. It's quite nice.
Okay, that's a nice contrast to have with some of the other projects that we're looking at on this. Then thank you. The project initiation document. So I'm really conscious this, the scope of that will change according to the type of project, and what we've heard of from Paul is very different to what we've heard from Claire. So it's just sort of reflecting on your particular project and how this works or isn't as relevant. Does every project have an initiation document? Is there a sort of step process that's followed? Or is that beyond before you sort of know anything to do with it, or how does this?
In my world, we have to do a PID for any continuous improvement projects that we're doing, because that forms the basis of our. We will utilize that into our business case.
Okay.
And justify it as a project for return on investment reasons.
So sort of it is the business case, really, isn't it?
Yeah. We generally have kind of like our PID as this is our almost a one form, a short form, and then we'll go into, because that will become our exec summary for the business case.
Okay. Is there anyone, given that some people have nothing to do with projects really, that this is sounding completely alien to? Jenny and Lee in particular.
A little bit, but like I said before, I've got access to at least 2 project managers that I can probably bounce things off of.
Yeah, good. And actually this, we don't need to know a detailed amount. There's examples on Moodle of them, but it's just understanding that really there's a process that needs to be followed, and it will be quite streamlined. Is there, for those of you that are involved in this sort of thing, are there templates that are, specific things? It sounds like from Claire's experience that you're at Balfour Beat, is that right, Claire? You're not highlighting. No, you what, sorry?
Amy,
sorry, I knew it wasn't Highways England, but I wasn't sure which one.
Yeah, no, we have an entire project management governance thing. So we have a project management manual that we have to follow. So the way that Amy does project management, it is basically APM. But it's got our own forms and templates in, and our own nuances when we have to kind of move around the business and what have you.
So yes, there will be. Do you think would anyone be able to access? So for those of you, so for just thinking for Lee and Jenny, do you think they'll be able to access sort of samples of these? Or
are all on the way we work, so I can dig them out and show, so that you guys can just send the links.
Yeah, that would be amazing, because I just obviously don't want to sort of put you in any commercially sort of sensitive thing, but just anything that's it's just more of the showing the process more than the sort of the actual what it's in it. Thank you. That would be really helpful if you don't mind.
You can see a lot of the process on APM. They've got some really good process maps on there. I'll dig them out and share them as well.
Yeah, if you put them in the chat for our group, that would be brilliant. Thank you. So just in terms, so for those of you that don't know what APM is, it's Association of Project Management, isn't it? And it's like the best practice, isn't it? Where you've got your qualifications as well. Do you want? Yeah. Okay. So just in terms of before and after initiation, on a very, very simplistic sort of perspective, in terms of what we're expecting from it. So before the initiation, is this the case that people don't actually know what the project is and why it's done? Especially if they've not, I suppose, if they're only just recruited to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they might. You might only know the outcome. You might not want. Yeah. You might not know how to get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And after it, is there a clear statement of? Do you feel there is a consensus or some clarity on it through the process?
Generally, yeah, because you need to. That becomes your kind of vision. That's your end goal, and if you don't know where you're going, you're on a bit of a
wood through the trees.
Yeah. And is that process, does it happen through an initiation meeting? What does it happen? Is there a kick-off meeting? What's the
yeah, they'll I mean, from my experience, we generally have project kick-off meetings which are collaborative, because I generally work on JVs. So they're collaborative, involving everybody that needs to be, and you will go through the project, why you're doing it, what the vision and goals are, and what the deliverables are.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so then you've got everything there that everyone knows that they're working towards, haven't you? So yeah, and that ties in, doesn't it? It's the idea of what success will actually look like. So we've got that through this process. So in terms of the key stakeholders, when are they defined for the?
When you do a stakeholder engagement strategy.
Okay, very good. And when does that happen really early on? Is that happening through the initiation process? Is that happening before that? Does it happen before that, sort of getting everyone involved, or does it happen at this?
Sorry, Claire.
I was going to say, I think for us, it happens at different stages, but the way we work and the links, and I'll dig them out during the break, our templates actually kind of give you who the mandatory stakeholders are, and it's after kind of the PID and you can see that clear picture of things that it's easier to identify further stakeholders. And then again, as your project changes, you just need to reassess not constantly, but regularly reassess who your key stakeholders are.
I think in our environment, it would depend on how big the project is as to when the stakeholders are kind of engaged. You could be working on quite a little, I say insignificant, but in the grand scheme of things, a cycle way, where you're going to engage probably at a later point down the line, because your stakeholders aren't going to be as big, that's not the right word I want, but as influential. Whereas if you've got a huge project, like some of the projects going on for HE at the minute, you've got government involvement, you've got MPs interested, where you're going to engage them earlier. So you'll have identified probably the key players right at this kind of point, but then you'll go through and work out the other stakeholders that are involved, in terms of landowners and people like that. But you'll have that broad knowledge of, we've got 4 MPs that are going to be really interested in this, so we need to engage with them quite quickly. So I think it depends.
And then this document that you're talking about, the DCO. DCO. I'm thinking drunken disorderly. I am. I got the wrong acronym. Does that include is there a budget attached to that? An indication or anything?
There'll probably be a very finger in the air.
Okay.
But it depends on how big the project is as to how big a DCO you will need. There are, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm pretty sure you'll have worked in DCOs where I've just got a bit of knowledge. You've got certain documents that have to be in place before the DCO is submitted. And what that means is if you've got a big project, those documents are going to be bigger and they're going to need a lot more people involved in them. Whereas if it's a smaller DCO project, it's going to be a lesser involvement.
Yeah, I mean, they're huge. It's a huge process. I was only involved with my particular area, but you have duties that you have to discharge to achieve the government's level of satisfaction, and I'm pretty sure it includes absolutely everything to do with sustainability and justifying the project. Cost has to be in there. I wasn't involved with the commercial side, but it's got to play a part. Because it's resources that your government's resources that you're using. So our one was like 50 documents or something, and I saw a picture of them all lined up in town hall, and you know, and it was an enormous scope of work, you know, which I only had a little part to play in, but yeah, it was massive for the M4. It's massive.
I know one of the projects we're working on, we've got a fully dedicated DCO team who are pulling it together, and they sit aside from kind of like our stakeholder team and our comms team. They are literally know-it-alls all about DCOs and how you need to get there. So I think it's one of those things that I'm not sure what happens if you fail a DCO. I'm not sure what the ramifications are other than a lot of money wasted. I don't know if you can then resubmit for a DCO or what that process is. But I would assume the fact that you've got quite a big team that are kind of solely employed to deliver, that, you know, it's an expensive big thing.
I think it would just get modified because the company whoever organisation was granted, whether it be HE or someone to build a DCO, it would have come from government interest anyway. So they're just basically giving it to someone to do the work to get it over the line. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't get the approval from, you know, effectively the members of the public, then it will just be modified. You just adjust it.
There's knock-on effects as well, though. So reputational effects. So LTC, Lower Thames Crossing, withdrew their DCO because early feedback told them that they'd have to change it drastically anyway. So rather than give the time for people to complain about it, they went and changed it anyway. But you stand yourself open for legal challenge as well if you've not done everything perfectly in terms of the development aspect. So there will be people, imagine HS2 get it, you know, looking for the loopholes and looking where they've not listened to every single person or can't demonstrate that they've listened to every single person, you know, and satisfied every single legal requirement and a standard and such. And so I think it will delay the project, and it's the potential cost implications and resource implications and reputational implications down the line, rather than necessarily you failed, you can't apply for another 6 months, like, you know, if you've applied for a job.
Yeah,
there has to be some very clever, like, it wasn't anything that I was exposed to, but you're right, there has to be a legal involvement that would be able to give a steer on the success of it before it gets submitted, and that's something that, you know, operates at a level beyond me anyway.
Yeah, I think it's that kind of next level, isn't it? You've had your consultations, you've taken all of those options, like Claire was saying, you've literally gone down every avenue of option to satisfy every stakeholder, every landowner on the scheme, and then you're kind of going to the planning inspectorate. There you go, have a look at it, make sure that we've ticked all of those boxes. And if you do have a really clever or somebody who is like ridiculously opposed to it, they can find those loopholes and your DCO can fail.
So it's so complex, isn't it? Because of the level of involvement, the level of scrutiny, the level of, but, you know, as you say, it sort of depends on the scale of it, I think, by the sounds of it, in terms of what extent
But one of project managers I work with, who's been purely on the procurement aspect, they've actually really enjoyed the process and the black and white process to stick to. they think it makes their lives much easier, and it kind of gives them reassurance that they're doing things properly, because as long as you stick to the process and you do everything properly, you can't be challenged successfully. So I think while it's annoying and frustrating, doing it well does help.
Well, this question about what can we do to ensure this stage is as successful as possible. When I'm listening to what you said, there is, because it's scoped out to such an extent with the sort of template, steps, procedures, the consultation, you know, everything is, because it's mapped out. It isn't like it's an ambiguous sort of thing where we can do a little tweak here or a little tweak there, is it? It's very defined.
Have you all heard the you know, the smart motorways got a bit of a bad press again in, I don't know if it's Panorama or whatever. This is looking at it from a different angle in the project's initiation side, but I've heard that HE are going to be looking at diverting resources away from big new projects to go and build new ERAs all over the bloody country, because that was seen by Sheffield High Court as a reason why, you know, the coroner ruled it, that the reason why there was these fatalities is that these refuse areas weren't more oftenly spaced. So I think HE's, I don't know if any of those HE on the call can confirm it, whether that I'm just hearing like word on the vine that you know, they're soon to start to initiate you know, the rebuilding of ERAs on already built smart motorways.
There's pressure when there is.
I was going to say that would be interesting, considering how many significant projects they've got going through in RIS2 that are already being trying to be accelerated. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Watch this space, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's I was just looking back at my slides to that. That's the big bang change. That is. That's where it's sort of almost you have to respond to things that you hadn't planned for, and it's going to have a trade-off, isn't it? Because other things will not. You can't do everything with what you've got. You know, you've got.
It's also an interesting look at the initiation side. Like it's almost a turnkey thing, isn't it? Like you know what's needed. You know the end product. It's just like get it done.
Yeah, absolutely, and that will change the speed of it, I suppose. So when the project team's all brought together, is it a sort of a day-long kick-off session, or what format can it take when people are coming together who are going to work on the project?
Generally, it's an all-day kick-off. We did a virtual kick-off for one of the new projects we started last year, obviously because of situation. But yeah, it's usually an all-day thing, hearing from all of the different disciplines and different project teams that are going to be involved. And it's creating that kind of behavioural and cultural charter of how.
Right, okay. And is the charter created from scratch, or is it something that you adhere to, or is it something that you agree? You know, how do you?
It's usually taken from a previous project we've worked on as a bit of a baseline, and then do we all agree? Where do we need to tweak and change it as needed for the situation in hand?
And do people tend to be quite motivated and sort of excited about it, or?
Yeah, until they get into the project. No, usually that kickoff meeting is quite full of energy. Everybody's really excited. It's this new big thing that's coming. It's going to be great. It's going to look good on my CV. So there's usually quite a lot of energy and motivation.
Okay, that's so we're sort of a high at this stage, we'd hope, wouldn't we? What in terms of project teams, so what's your experience in terms of, are there sort of specialist ones where it's their full-time job, or is it that people, is it more of a sort of bringing together of existing sort of basically, is it part of someone's job? What do you know, does it, or again, is this dependent on the scale of the project? So are you sort of assigned permanently as a full-time role, or do people ever sort of have it as almost in a matrix way?
I think it is a big, depending on the size of the project. I mean, I know early last year I was embedded within 4 different projects. who all apparently had me as a full-time resource, but we won't talk about that. So there is
a lot of money. Yeah. Okay.
There's definitely this thing where things aren't thought about properly, i.e. they don't think about the forward pipeline and the people they're putting forward. So you get to the team and you'll notice quite a lot of similar faces, especially on the Highways England stuff, because they're all people that have worked on Highways England contracts before. So they're all pulled in to work on this one, and you're all sat there going, oh, hello again. And you find the same teams, and then you've got the disciplines coming in as well.
So the disciplines, what, being their specialisms, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so they'll be the specialists. So it will be the people who know all about highways, and then you'll have that team split into kind of like signing and lining and things like that. And then you'll have the environmental team, which is split down. So you almost have kind of that PMO and the project manager, and then you have the disciplines that kind of sitting underneath it, who will then have a discipline manager who looks over all of their streams and feeds back up into the main project.
And how do they do sort of team build? Do they do any team building to sort of get, if you're all sort of going to be sort of heavily involved in it? It sounds like the motivation's there, but is there anything more that's done to sort of really get people joined up?
In some projects we've done lots of like collaborative team building because we've had JVs and we've had to be this integrated team. So Highways England in the last couple of years have really focused in on this integrated team approach. So everybody being kind of for the project and all working for the same kind of vision and goals. And we've had team building when we could actually see people face to face, and we've done kind of team building activities, gone on like days away to kind of do team building stuff, which has always really helped, because you do get in, especially when you're so spread, you do get into a silo mentality of just, I need to deliver what I need to deliver, and doesn't really matter about anyone else. So part of those team buildings was always kind of a really in-depth project kind of update, which is always really good, because then you get to see what other people are doing.
Yeah, that sounds good. Daniel or Chloe, because you were talking, with the HS2, because that's just reminded me with the sort of collaborative, organisations coming together in a joint venture to deliver parts of it. Was there any of this sort of team building going on when you started to work together?
There is ongoing. So throughout, I've been on the project a year. We call it an IPT, an integrated project team. So as well as the contractors being a joint venture, it's also integrated and collaborative with the designer and the client. So yeah, that's definitely a collaborative approach, and
we'll talk about that then a bit because we've got collaboration after our lunch break, which we've done before. But yeah, if we bring that in, because that sounds that sounds like an approach to really foster that. So that sounds good. Thank you. So in terms of how they decide who's on the team, then from Amy's perspective, it sounds like anyone who's been involved, that's a bit glib, but with Highway England projects before seems to be one of the things. How do they? There's obviously going to be a number of factors in the project that Claire was talking about. The sort of team project management. It's all about, I don't know, the scale and scope, isn't it, in terms of who's involved in this, and the stage, by the sounds of it as well. When we're looking at particularly sort of strategically important, there's again, we've heard examples on this, like with the M4, haven't we, that was there more put into it initially, do you think? Did it have is it almost like in terms of its strategic importance, Stephen, with the M4 project, has the resourcing changed throughout the process?
What do you mean, process of delivery?
Yeah.
The people shifting around all over the time, which doesn't help. It's due to the demands of the wider business.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the other people, Balfour Beatty of you on the call will know that you're told where you go a lot of the time. you sometimes have the luxury of choice, but of course, a lot of members of staff like to move around a little bit. You know, everyone's got their preference in terms of type of project and geography. So yeah, I mean, a job. It's such a big job, and you know, it's had such a big shifting of resources. You know, that people have moved around an awful lot, and it's always a challenge. You know, to try and retain. You know, the members of staff you want to retain, and make sure because it always causes a bit of an upset to a project when it's ever shifting. Not even people moving on and off the job, but you see teams moving around within the project, and it's something that you absolutely have to be on top of, like, in order to achieve collaboration, like knowing who to speak to, you know, about a particular package of works. But it's certainly, it's a big challenge.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, how long has the project been going for?
Well, it basically was, I think it was awarded like the spring to summer of 2016. So it's been going on, and we're set for delivery unofficially this summer. But I think we're going for an early delivery. That's why there's a big push on at the moment.
Right.
Trying to have it open for September.
Okay.
5 years.
Well, yeah, and so all these factors are going to impact, you know, the stability of a team as well, really, because resourcing cannot stay the same throughout it. So the material that I'm showing is a very oversimplified, pure way of sort of, you know, we're recruiting people, they're all like really exciting. We've got a schedule of meetings, we've got sort of this team building. I mean, the idea of having reward systems as well I mean, that's just lovely if we've got like continuity, but if we've got goalposts that aren't moving, you know, it's all, as I say, it's oversimplified, isn't it, really, in terms of, you know, this is almost like being operating in a vacuum, isn't it? Without the sort of complexities of all the other demands that are going on. So in terms of like the projects, we've got a mixture of, so Claire was talking about being involved in 4 different projects at one point in time. We've got dedicated teams as well. Do you feel, is there ever a time where having a matrix, so having people who are involved, have got a number of different responsibilities, including your project, is there ever a time where that's the best approach, or is a dedicated team always ideally the best way forward?
On a big project, I think you have the dedicated teams. It's normally in from what I see, it's the smaller jobs that often result in hat wearing, where you don't quite often have the diversity or even the resource to be assigning a dedicated resource to do a certain task. And
in that, is there a conflict in terms of trying to get people together at the same time and things like that? Is it quite difficult to manage when people have,
There's always you've always got that difficulty because people ultimately want to go where they want to go. Like at the moment, the HS2 black hole seems to be sucking in every resource that Balfour Beatty seems to have at the moment. So yeah, I mean, you do often have shortfalls in labour pools. You know, I know we've struggled to get engineers or the right people together at the same time, and it quite often results having to do certain things within the project to upskill.
So I think, again, I think this, it isn't like there is a choice. It depends on the scales, the nature of the project, it just, the stage of the project as well, whether you're actually able to get, you know, who's available, so please, when you're sort of looking at this, look at the material, but also, you know, challenge it in terms of actually it doesn't, in an ideal world, this is how it would happen. But in reality, I mean, for what you've described, we haven't even, on Claire's projects, 10 or few members of the team.
Technically, my team is 5 people right now.
It's like 5 of them are project managers, aren't they? And you're...
what we've got is we've actually got a mix of the matrix and the dedicated team.
Okay.
So we've got the kind of project management skills within one team, which is in strategy and planning, because that's where the project has sat. Because remember when I said earlier, you know, and then we hand it off. And then over the past couple of years, we started bringing in the BAU team, and we've had the commercial team in, and like our technical advisors, and that's the big multidisciplinary team. And then in the next stage, we've just been talking to ITD and talking to people, whereas now we've got a project structure which has about 5 different directorates in. It's got externally resourced people in, but some people are on 2 work streams, but they're going to be the same person. They're not full time. But answering Claire's point, we've had to really not jump through hoops, but showing we've done that consideration of, will these people have enough time to dedicate their assigned time to this project? And we fought quite fiercely to have dedicated team members, or named people, because otherwise we just get constantly passed around the houses when we're trying to get some expertise in. So technically my team is only 5, and it's about to go down to 2. So
oh, that's gonna put a lot of pressure on.
People are leaving, people are coming, going, that sort of thing. So it's fun.
Yeah, it's and then this bit, members are located within a conversational distance of each other. Well, that's going to work now, isn't it? So you can tell this the sort of best practices. You've got to be fluid with this. So just to sum up in terms of this, so this is all about the initiation, this part. So we've got, I think it was 400. Let's have a look. So analyse the process for initiating projects, approximately 325 words. So all these sorts of things you could put into it. I think we need to assume that actually the parameters are already sorted. So this is the bit where we know we're going to go ahead. We've got the sort of the DCOs sorted, and actually it's about it could be about the documentation that you're talking about. It could be about the sort of coming together initially and the scoping, the purpose of the project, setting objectives. It could be, there's lots of things here where you sort of define, it's all about scoping really, defining parameters, assessing risk, looking at who the stakeholders could be. There's a lot that you could be talking about here. Don't think you have to go wide and thin on this. So you don't have to almost like list all these different things. What you can do instead is you could be focused a lot more on sort of a couple of key aspects of the initiation process in your experience, and actually what leads them to being more successful than others. So do feel free to flex this according to your sort of personal project experience. So is there, I know this is sort of, it is going to be quite, vague's the wrong word, it's just very much tailored to how you do things and what your experience is. But I think it's sort of, I think in some ways it has quite a few similarities, doesn't it?